My phone accidentally picked up my husband's call while I told my friends I thought he was gay. If I could take back one moment, one sentence, I'd reverse the words and actions that broke my marriage in a heartbeat. But some things, once said, can never be unsaid. This is going to take a bit to explain, and I'll do my best to keep it straight. But my mind is a mess right now, so bear with me. My name is Kate, and I have been crying nonstop for 5 days now because my 3-year-old marriage is over, due to my recklessness. My husband and I have been together for 4 years and married for 3. We were close friends for a little period of time before dating, and we genuinely believed we had found true love. You see, Jemmy is a sweet husband, and I love him so much, but there was a time I thought I didn't. But before you judge me, here's a bit of a background story. Jemmy is a workaholic, and I was totally not against that because I am a stay-at-home wife, so he worked hard to pay all the bills and provide all the necessities. He took care of me in every possible way, emotionally and materially, so that I never have to worry about a thing. As a stay-at-home wife, I saw how much effort he poured into his job, yet he never let that come at the expense of our well-being. He never forgot to make me feel secure, ensuring that all our needs are met and that I'm always supported. With Jemmy, I never had to worry until that changed and it cost me my husband. Initially, when we first got married, Jemmy was always the first to initiate anything, but right before we crashed, everything felt different, at least from my point of view. Also, we were the model couple for our friends and everyone else around us. They would always seek relationships advice from us. Jemmy was the perfect husband I wanted to spend my eternity with, but I'm not sure of that anymore. And it's all my fault. Fast forward to how it all started. Jemmy gave his all when it has to do with work, which is a good thing. I mean, who doesn't love a hardworking man, especially when he meets all your needs and expectations in life? And working hard doesn't mean giving yourself away, but that's exactly what Jemmy did. He gave a piece of himself away bit by bit, and that was enough to mess with my brain. One night, after one of our beautiful intimate moments together, Jemmy told me about his plans to get a promotion so I can live the way I so much wanted. Not like we were poor, I just wanted more. His plans included working harder than he was already. I wanted to be really supportive, but I didn't know that meant pushing me away from his life. That's how I saw it, and that's exactly what he did. He pushed me away, but I realized later he wasn't the one behind the push, and that it was me all along, and I only blamed it on himself as a way of not letting myself feel guilty. First of all, Jemmy and his brother are best friends, and they work in the same company. They had this unique and admirable friendship that every sibling would wish for, and I was thankful for that as well because we all became friends, and some of the time we all hung out together. Jemmy is very handsome, and so was his brother Timothy. I think it's a family thing because I've seen pictures of their deceased parents, and they're nothing short of beauty. Jemmy and Timothy lost their parents when they were both young, and since then, it's been the two of them. They've been really supportive of each other, and that has only deepened their bond. Normally, once Jemmy returned from work, he spent his time making sure he didn't miss out on anything at home or about me. He made sure I felt loved and appreciated, but all of a sudden that changed. Jemmy started being distant and pulling away from me in noticeable ways. At first, it was subtle. My husband had always been a hard worker, but suddenly it was like he was in a different world entirely, one that didn't include me. He started coming back home late every night, sometimes looking worn out, other times just distracted. He'd mumble an apology, kick off his shoes, and head straight to bed. It wasn't like him. We used to have dinner together every night, even if he came home tired. But then, we barely had dinner together anymore, or talked about our day, or shared stories and laughed over silly things that happened at his office or in the neighborhood. Those days of connection were slipping away, one late night after another. I totally understood him because I knew he was doing this for us. But it didn't get better. It got worse. Not only was he coming home late, but he'd also started staying up when he got home. He would sit on the couch or at the kitchen table, and his face would be glowing blue from his laptop screen with his fingers tapping away like his life depended on it. And if he wasn't on his laptop, he was glued to his phone, typing messages to who knows who. One day I approached him and he apologized for everything and told me I should give him a little bit of time and that everything will work out fine and he will make it up to me. He claimed it was a busy period for him at work. I took his words and didn't really mind as far as he was doing his best to take care of us. I even supported him and gave him the go-ahead. Then he stopped coming home every night. He stayed over some days at work, and at first I thought he was cheating with another woman, but there was no other woman in his life except me. I confirmed that. One night when he came home early, although I would love to say accidentally got home early, I went through his phone when he left to shower. I knew his password, so I opened his phone, but there was nothing to be mad about. The only two numbers he was frequently texting and receiving calls from were his boss and his brother Timothy, so I didn't bother to check the details of their text. I trusted his relationship with his brother, and besides that, they have every right to text all the time. They're siblings. Also, his boss is male, so I've nothing to worry about. So maybe I was just overthinking everything. Maybe it was the stress of work that truly kept him up at work. But then, his boss started calling him out at odd hours. At first, I didn't think much of it. I get his busy schedules and all that. But this time, it felt different. The calls would come in after dinner, and just when I thought we might actually spend some time together. His phone would ring, and I'd watch him answer with that same weary look in his eyes, and his voice would become low, and sometimes he would even step out of my presence to answer the call. Annoyingly, the next thing that followed would be him grabbing his jacket and rushing out. At first, I believed him. I'd remind myself that his boss had always been a demanding type, the kind who expected his employees to be available around the clock. Maybe this was just a rough patch at work, a big project that required an extra hour. And he's really working hard to get that promotion so we can live a more luxurious life together. But then the dinners started happening. He'd come home after one of those late-night calls, and when I asked where he'd been, he'd tell me they'd gone out to dinner, just him and his boss to discuss business over a meal. I told him I thought he hated those work dinners, but he shrugged and said there's nothing he can do, that it was part of the job. I tried to tell myself that it wasn't strange for his boss to call him out so late, that these dinners were just a necessary part of his career. But deep down, something didn't sit right with me. Without a word of complaint from me, he would apologize and say he knew he was not the perfect partner at the moment, but he wanted to make me proud, and that he's this close to getting that promotion, and thanks to his efforts and skillful talent, he has become his boss's favorite. I always thought his apologies were made out of the guilt he was feeling for hurting me and pretending to use work as an excuse. But that wasn't all. Another one that made me conclude that my marriage was failing was the unexpected emergency meeting in another city. He explained how it came up last minute and he would rather be home with me, but the trip was important. I started to wonder what kind of emergencies could possibly require him to be away so often. Was he really just that indispensable to his boss? Or was there something else going on? Something he didn't want to tell me? I couldn't take it any longer. My mind was spinning with questions I didn't dare ask. During one of his emergency trips, I called Timothy over to inquire more about everything, but that was the breaking point of everything. When I explained everything to Timothy, he stated there might be more to it because his boss no longer has anyone's time except for Jemmy. They spend almost every time together and do everything in secret, and that confirmed my suspicions. I knew how close his brother was to him and how much he valued their relationship, so he wouldn't just light fire without smoke. I didn't expect this twist at all. I was the one that forced Jemmy into getting a promotion because I didn't like his position at the company, although it wasn't a bad position and his pay was good. But I needed him to rise higher so I could live a more luxurious life and brag around with my friends, but then his boss took him away from me. Since he started working excessively, we've not had anything, and he was always too tired to initiate anything. Even when I'll shower and dress in the most sexy of lingerie next to him, Jemmy won't still make a move. Now everything made sense. Spending time with Timothy during his absence made me realize how boring and stupid our marriage was, and that's when I did the unthinkable. Jemmy was doing his, and I was doing mine. I didn't care to confront him, and it didn't bother me because I thought I didn't love him anymore, and I hated him for sucking up to his boss and replacing him with me. I forgot all about him during his trip days because I had someone equally or more charming than him then. Also, I started manipulating him to work harder and go on more trips so he wouldn't have to interfere with my own plans. It got serious and out of control when I did the worst thing a wife should never do. Instead of confronting my husband and communicating my feelings sincerely to him, I made myself hate him for that period. Maybe I couldn't blame him for anything because that was my own way to not feel guilty for cheating on him with his brother. There were days he would call and I'd be on the phone telling him how much I missed him while I was seriously being busy with his brother in bed. And what made it more exciting was Timothy was not going easy on me, especially during the calls. Sometimes I'd mute his call on my end, leaving him hanging till he was tired, and then he would end the call. Later, when he would call back or whenever I chose to answer his call again, I'd apologize and tell him it was due to a bad network and I couldn't hear him, and made up whatever excuses I see fit for the situation. Sometimes I would shout for him and blame him for being the reason we were not talking much. He would believe me without doubt and apologize because he loved me. And these went on and on and on. Like they say, all good things must come to an end. And that's exactly why I'm here, because I'm barely breathing right now and I need help. It's overwhelming. It didn't have to end that way. It all came crumbling down when my friends came over for some drinks. Jemmy wasn't in town and wasn't going to be back in a few days. And naturally, I took advantage of the situation. I opened bottles of wine and rolled out crates of beer. It was like a mini party, just for close friends. We sat in the living room, played grown-up games, and talked about everything. One of the girls casually mentioned how she really needed to get out of the house that night. When we asked why, she said that her husband took every chance he got to make love to her. She was exhausted and needed a break. In my frustration, I gasped that she was at least getting some action. That was when they asked me what was wrong. I didn't want to say anything at first, but everyone was there bearing their souls out, and it would only be wrong for me to hold my cards to my chest. And to be honest, I was dying to tell my marital problems to someone else. So with that, I spilled the tea. I told them how I haven't been intimate with Jemmy for the longest time. They all gasped in disbelief. Some even asked me how I was still functioning without getting my joints lubricated frequently. I laughed and continued, mentioning that he preferred his boss over me, and that they have a relationship that made our marriage look like strangers living in the same house. I expressed my suspicion of them being romantically and intimately involved with each other. "I think my husband is gay," I said with an unsettling taste in my mouth. Most of them gasped in shock and others laughed. I told them how it made me feel uncomfortable that he'd come home and lay beside me after being frivolous with his boss. My complaint went on and on for a proper amount of time, like I had been waiting for an opportunity to say all this. My friends made jokes about how my husband would participate in role play with his boss to make things interesting between them. One of them even mentioned that she could already imagine my husband in bed with his boss, and in saying that, the image got in my head too. It gave me chills. But that wasn't the heart-rending part. The fact is, I fell asleep, drunk as a fish. And when I woke up the next morning, my friends were all over the place. They had found whatever spot they could lay on to sleep in their drunken state, but I saw a figure standing in front of me. The image was blurry, but it was soon clear enough for me to know who it was. It was Jemmy standing there. I got up and looked around. The house was scattered and dirtied, and I could see the displeasure on Jemmy's face. He stood there, stern as a well-rooted tree. I sprang up, and the first question I asked was, what was he doing there? He looked around with disgust and opened with the news that he got the promotion, which was way earlier than planned. And I wanted to be happy for him, but the situation felt off, and he had a scary look on his face. So instead, I asked him why he looked that way if he just got what we have always wanted. He first looked around and shouted at the top of his lungs, ordering everyone to wake up. It was like I was seeing a monster. No. Some of my friends were so consumed by hangovers that they couldn't hear him or even bother to wake up. That was when Jemmy picked up a throw pillow and started smacking them with it while shouting. In his fury, he said he was on his way to the airport to fly back home when he called to inform me of the good news and tell me he'd be coming back early. But instead, he heard me demeaning him to a group of stupid people who were okay enough to listen. I quickly picked up my phone and checked my call log. I was on call with Jemmy for over 10 minutes the previous night. He heard everything I said about him being gay. Jemmy lost it. He was pained that he had sacrificed so much for me, for us, so we can have a better life. And that was how I could repay him. He said I stabbed him in the back in the most humiliating of ways. While he was raging, my friends were all quiet and terrified. Jemmy looked at them all with a condescending frown, and with the rage of thunder, he shouted that they should all get out of his house. Like rats, they scampered off. He said that if any one of them were still hiding in the house, he would find them and they wouldn't like the end of it. When he didn't get any answers, he walked upstairs and I followed fervently. He checked the first room. It was empty. Then he checked our room and it was also empty. But there was a creaking sound coming from the wardrobe and my heart tanked. He pulled the doors open and Timothy was standing there in only his underwear with his clothes in hand, held up against his groin area. Jemmy called his name in shock, and he saw the guilt and embarrassment on Timothy's face. He looked at me to say something, and I had the same guilt and embarrassment. He couldn't believe it. He began staggering backwards, and I called his name to try and calm him down. He asked what he clearly now knew the answer to. He asked if we had been sleeping together. I was so flushed with guilt that I couldn't answer. But Timothy opened his mouth to tell my husband I had seduced him and forced him to sleep with me. But he refused, considering the fact that they were brothers. But then, I brought some crazy friends over who drugged him and forced him to do what he never wanted to. I was shocked to the bone. I never expected that from Timothy. I fell into tears. I begged Jemmy not to listen to him, that he was lying. He was the one that flirted with me first, and because of how hard things had been between us. Without batting an eye, Jemmy looked at Timothy and disowned him as his brother. Then Jemmy looked at me and told me that I should be out of his house by the time he got back. He said he never wanted to see our faces again. And I didn't know just how serious he meant that. He stormed out of the door and I followed him, begging and crawling behind him. But he didn't care what I had to say. He walked out of the house and out of my life. And that was how I lost my husband. Please, how do I earn my husband's trust back? I don't want to navigate this life without him. I wish I didn't get so drunk that night that I accidentally answered his call without knowing. Please help me if you have advice on what I should do. I'm desperate. Update.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, I'm back and I wished I could say it's good news, but the reality is I'm heartbroken. It feels surreal, like I'm trapped in a nightmare I can't wake up from. I miss him so much. I miss the laughter, the comfort, the love we built together. It's hard to imagine a life without him. I know most of you here blame me for not trusting him and holding on to him after I had pushed him to work hard for my selfish desires. But that's not what I need right now. I don't need that hate. The negativity in this platform is too much. I know what I did was brutal, and Jemmy felt betrayed, and also thanks to me, his relationship with his brother is damaged forever. None of us are perfect. We've all made mistakes, but that doesn't define who we are. So please calm down with your harsh words and criticism, because I'm really trying my best to learn from my mistakes and never to be that kind of person again if life lets me. It's just that the repercussions of my actions and words have made life a living hell for me. Because after Jemmy drove me away, I went back to his house after he stopped responding to my texts and calls. But it was too late. He had sold the house and he moved away from the city. His promotion was a big one, and he was also transferred to the international branch of his company. So it was a good start for him, but not for me. Thinking about everything I'm missing out on because of my lack of patience and trust, it hurts badly. Jemmy had mentioned that if I was questioning his sexuality and didn't trust him enough, I should have spoken up and maybe it wouldn't have gotten to this, but I didn't. I slept with his brother and then made fun of him with my friends. I let the devil use me. The thing is, I don't have anywhere else to go. I've been squatting with one of my friends for a few days now. Luckily for me, she's the only one that opened the door for me. But now, she's complaining about me every single time and even gossips me to her colleagues. She blamed me for cheating on my husband when he was busy trying to build a good life for us. Honestly, I know I was in the wrong, but I'm tired of hearing her say it. She has threatened to throw me out soon. I don't know what to do. To add injury to salt, I'm pregnant and it's Timothy's, but he has completely denied it. He said I was a slut, and I have probably slept around with different men, and now I have no shame trying to force him to take care of another person's child. He has refused to take responsibility, and I am left alone in this cruel world with no money, no job, or a life of my own. Jemmy was my life and threw that away for nothing. Yesterday, I received divorce papers from him via mail, but I'm still holding on to hope that maybe he'll reconsider, but deep down, I know I have to accept his decision. I pray this is not of me, because as I sit here trying to type this, my tears won't stop falling. My hands are trembling, and my screen blurs every few seconds because I can't hold back the tears. It's like my heart is breaking all over again with every letter that I'm typing, and I don't even know if I'm making sense anymore. But I needed to get this out, even if it hurts more than I can put into words. Thank you for reading. I just needed to vent. I'm trying to focus on healing and learning from this painful experience, but it's so incredibly hard right now.